This fire and martial arts build is all about buffing your fire damage and your martial arts potential to deal an insane amount of damage with the Drought Demon Blade. So let's break it all down. Let me know in the comments what build you would like me to do next. So firstly, let's talk about how this build essentially works. Now, I am focusing on the fire virtue as well as putting points into the poison virtue. Now, these two status effects work well together because the burn status effect will gradually decrease the enemy's HP, whereas the poison status effect will reduce their flame resistance, so for fire, but it'll also gradually decrease their HP and spirit gauge. So you combine those two like damage over time abilities and you get some really good value out of having two damage over time effects active at once. But for the most part, we're not going to be applying poison heaps. Poison is really a backup / boss secondary option. We're using some other of the wizardry spells in the poison line to put debuffs onto the enemy to increase our overall damage. Now, the main way we're doing this, or firstly, the easiest way you'll do this in the start of the game is by amplified damage and then combining that with enhanced defense. So amplified damage will increase your overall damage to enemies, but it also increases their damage to you. Enhanced defense can mitigate this by increasing your defense. So you still get the benefits of, having that extra damage, but you lose the negative of taking extra damage to some degree. It's not going to completely remove it, but you get a lot of that little bit of reduction to damage you will take. It also allows you to attack through most hits, which is really beneficial for martial arts. In some instances, you'll find that without this and without some of the extra benefits of some of the stronger martial arts, you'll try and cast one and you'll just get staggered out of it, which is really annoying because they're such valuable skills that if you get staggered out of them all the time, it's hard to really see the value. So preventing that is really beneficial. But the main, stat or a thing that we're leaning into is the Shimmering Sun martial art on the Drought Demon Blade. Now, this blade is really strong on its own, and we'll break it all down when we get into the equipment section. But this Ash of War, so what it does is it's a typical Ash of War where you just spin your weapon around and do some nonsense. But when you have high spirit, it wreaths your weapon in flames. So essentially it acts as if you're using a flame weapon. It also enhances damage and prevents you from staggering unless it's a powerful attack. So we want to be buffing our martial arts as much as possible, while also having secondary effects that will apply negative effects to enemies based on hitting a martial art, or in some cases deflecting, like the armor set that we are using. So for the wizardry spells here, we've already discussed amplify damage and enhanced defense, which will pretty much be staples throughout most of your playtime, and they're also very easy to get at the very start of the game. I would also be using overpower burst as one of the key wizardry spells for this build. So what this does is greatly enhances the damage dealt by the next wizardry spell or martial arts next used. So you want to put this off and then use the Shimmering Sun, so you get extra damage from that and it will deal heaps of damage. If you're using this immediately before you cast Shimmering Sun, just make sure you're still in the positive, in the spirit state. You only need a slither of positive high spirit to be able to trigger the additional benefits on the, I almost said Ash of War there, on the martial arts skill. Oof, I played too much Elden Ring. All right, I've ticketed a lot with different spells here. There's plenty of really good options in both the flame and poison line, but I like Life Wither. So you release a cursed bolt that'll hit the target. When it does, they'll receive more damage for a period of time. This is just beneficial because they'll take more damage. And we are really focusing on buffing ourselves for that martial arts and other effects, right? Because we've got amplified damage, then we're also putting this negative effect on the enemies, and then we can buff our martial arts as well. So that's really the key focus here, is why I'm leaning into that. But you could switch this out, especially before you can get overpower burst, as it's one of the later flame spells. You could run flame weapon or even toxic weapon, which I was using for a while as well. So you can apply that toxic effect, so you can have both active at a time. There's a lot of good value here. I wouldn't say that any is particularly wrong. And if you're not struggling with defense issues, you could also drop enhanced defense and run one of those as well. For the Divine Beast, I am using Zuki, or I don't know how to say that, but the main reason here is because you get power gain upon martial arts. So every time you trigger a martial arts, then your damage will overall increase. It's also a fire Divine Beast, so it stacks perfectly with this sort of build that we're using. Moving on to your stats or your virtues, fire is your primary virtue, so you want to maximize this. Now, I haven't specifically figured this out, but I think 60 is the cap or soft cap for stats, that sort of thing. I'm still testing this, but around 60 I think is probably what you want to go for. If you do actually know the answer to that, let me know in the comments below, while save me the effort of trying to figure that out. Moving on to earth and metal is probably your secondaries. Metal will be your main secondary stat, while earth being the, extra one for the enhanced defense and any other defensive stats that you want to use, as there is some good defensive skills into the earth line that you can use, because this is a very offensive build and you are a little bit of a glass cannon, so having that extra little bit of defense in those spells that you want to use could be valuable. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just go straight into wood for the extra HP that you get for wood. For your equipment, we'll start with the Drought Demon Blade. Now this weapon comes from pretty much as being a random drop in like the part 6 part of the game, so the very kind of end, it's just a random drop there, so it's a bit of a luck chance to get. But if you do get this weapon, it's so powerful, and it does have its own set scalings that you can do with the Cursed Star of Hijan. This will improve your curved saber damage, which is really the main benefit from having that set and wearing all of the pieces. But that set is all about increasing your metal, and you could absolutely wear it. I've just stuck with the Young Conqueror set that I was wearing for my build that I've basically been using through most of the game, as I feel like it fits better with this build that we're using, especially when you talk about the set bonuses that will add damage amplification to enemies on actually triggering a critical blow, which you'll do pretty much on every boss fight. So you get that extra benefit from doing that as well. I'm also using the Tiger Fang Dual Halberds, which is to complete the Young Conqueror set. Now this whole set, including these halberds, come from the Sun Sea ally, so if you max him out, he'll just give you a copy of all of this at full rarity, so you can put this on. Now it's also worth mentioning that the passives for your gear is probably more important than just the gear themselves. So these passives being like damage dealt or damage reduction upon martial arts, those sort of things. These different effects like damage reduction upon martial arts are critical to put on your build, or say add power drop on enemy upon martial arts, something like that. Damage dealt, flame attack power, also very important. Anything that you can add that will benefit your flame damage or add effects to enemies is important. Also, just to point out, for your ranged weapons, we're not really using them in this build at all, but you can change the passives effects on these to give you still beneficial stuff for your build, even if you're not using ranged weapons. Though, because this is a fire build, the Flying General's Bow does actually stack with fire, so you could use that if you were using some sort of ranged weapon, but it's just worth pointing that out. Accessories are essentially the exact same thing. Those special effects, those passives are the key things that you want to put on them, and because you can't change those passives for accessories, making sure you've got the right ones on that actually giving you something beneficial is important. For kind of an early game version of this build, as I am aware that, you know, the Drought Demon Blade is pretty end game, I was originally using basically this exact same build except with a slashing spear, the slashing spear you get for Sang Fei's ally quest, which is another fire ally that you can max out and get his set and his weapon. That is a really good slashing spear that does scale pretty well, and you can also use his set because it does have martial arts in it, so you get martial arts benefits from that. So this build could essentially work exactly the same while using that and using his set. And until you can get some of these armor sets, the Shanwei Soldier or the Nameless Warrior Garb are both beneficial to equip at that same time. Some quick tips for this build is that martial arts are king, so you want to make sure you're triggering this on enemies while buffing it as much as possible. Now, before you do a fatal strike, when you use stance break an enemy, you can buff yourself with adding a secondary effect to a weapon, say toxic weapon or something like that, or even just amplified damage, as it will increase your damage for that fatal strike that you're doing. And if you don't want to rely on the martial arts to apply the flame weapon, you can just run it. Like for most of this build, as I was playing through the game, I was just running flame weapon and toxic weapon, and at one point I was running lightning weapon as well because I was playing around with like a wood version. So nothing wrong with running those spells, it's just because you only got 4 spell slots, if you can apply these kind of extra effects without having to use one of those spell slots, it is kind of beneficial. So that's why I've gone that route for this kind of a setup. Let me know what you think of this build in the comments down below and what other builds you'd like me to do. Thanks guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.